Nobody thought Stargate was going to work. The script struggled to find support. The production faced setback after setback. Even some of the people making the film had doubts about what they were creating. At various points, it seemed like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And yet, against all expectations, Stargate became a worldwide hit and launched a franchise that lasted for decades. So how did a movie that nearly fell apart multiple times become one of science fiction's most successful franchises? And what happened behind the scenes that fans still can't believe today? Join us as we count down 21 incredible facts about Stargate that will completely change how you see the film. Number 21. Every major Hollywood studio passed on it. The pitch was straightforward. An ancient ring-shaped device beneath the Egyptian desert opens a wormhole to a distant planet, populated by humans who were transplanted there by an alien being who has been worshipped as a god for 10,000 years. A linguist and a military colonel go through the gate, get stranded on the other side, and had to lead a slave rebellion against a being of extraordinary power before the nuclear device they brought with them destroys everyone. Every major studio in Hollywood looked at that pitch and said no. As Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin revealed on the film's 25th anniversary, the script was rejected by every major studio they took it to. The reasons varied, but the core objection was consistent. The film was too expensive to justify the risk for an original concept with no existing audience. The film was eventually made independently, which is why its production company is Centropolis Film Productions rather than a major Hollywood studio, and why the foreign sales strategy was so central to the entire financing structure. But before any of that could happen, they had to convince an actor who had turned them down multiple times to actually show up. Number 20. Kurt Russell's multiple rejection. Kurt Russell was at the top of the production's wish list from the beginning. One of the executive producers explained that he would be a really great name for foreign sales since they were making the film independently. However, Kurt Russell turned them down multiple times. He did not like the script and was not interested in the project. So, he passed. What eventually happened was a combination of the right salary number and an embarrassing clerical error. The production finally hit the payday that convinced Kurt to sign on. Then they discovered that the script he had been given, the one he had been reading for all those months of rejections, was a very early draft that should never have been sent to anyone. Someone had handed the star of the film a draft that was not remotely close to what they were actually planning to make. Interestingly, the near miss that almost kept Stargate from having its leading man also made another man sign. Let's find out who. Number 19. James Spader signed on because the script was terrible. When James Spader was asked why he agreed to do Stargate, his answer was one of the more unusual explanations ever. He said the script was just awful, and that sort of intrigued him. Once he was on set, the regret set in. He was constantly asking Emmerich about his character's motivation, and even appeared embarrassed to be on the production. And on at least one significant occasion, he refused to come out of his trailer until his scenes were rewritten. Kurt Russell was not pleased about the trailer situation. He had come to the project somewhat reluctantly himself, had agreed to do it for a financial reason, and was not interested in dealing with an actor who was holding the production hostage over his distaste for dialogue. Kurt told James directly that of course the dialogue was horrible. That was why they were paying him. If the writing were brilliant, he wouldn't need the paycheck. In the end, both Russell and Spader were pleased with the finished film. The script they thought was terrible produced a film they were proud of. Which raises the obvious question, what was going on with the third major cast member while all of this was happening? Number 18. The Personal Assistant Disappearing Act. Of all the production chaos generated by Stargate's shoot in 1993, nothing comes close to what was happening on J. Davidson's side of the equation, and Roland Emmerich's description of it to Variety is one of the more extraordinary accounts of on-set dysfunction in modern Hollywood history. Jay had been cast as Ra, the ancient alien being in human form who serves as the film's primary antagonist. He had come to international attention in Neil Jordan's The Crying Game in 1992, where his performance had been so striking and so unexpected that he was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. He was a genuine discovery, the kind of actor who arrives from nowhere with a specific quality that the camera responds to in ways that other performers cannot replicate. He was also, during the production of Stargate, dealing with significant personal difficulties. Emmerich said the first bad sign came when Jay's personal assistant, who was the bass player from Frankie Goes to Hollywood, disappeared on the second day of filming with Davidson's phone, all his petty cash, and his methadone. Jay went from hysterical to genuinely struggling in a very short period of time. He was having difficulty remembering his lines. Emmerich said he could write a book about what happened with Davidson during the shoot. Jay retired from acting immediately after Stargate. He never appeared in another film or television production. He walked away from a career that had produced an Oscar nomination and a franchise-launching villain appearance because, as he told interviewers, he simply did not want to act anymore. But while all of this personal chaos was unfolding with the cast, what was happening to the character of Ra himself? Because the villain you see in the film is not the villain they originally wrote. Number 17. The test screening audience that changed the villain. The Ra that exists in the finished film, an ancient, powerful alien being in a human host body, essentially a god who has enslaved humanity for millennia, was not the Ra in the original screenplay. The original version of the character was an Egyptian human who worked for the aliens. He was the boss of the human slaves on the planet, but he himself was still subordinate to alien beings above him. He was not at the top of the hierarchy. The test screening that forced this change was not a minor adjustment. Transforming the central villain from a human collaborator to an alien entity required reshoots, additional scenes, and the specific casting choice that gave Davidson the Nefertiti headdress and the golden eye effects that made Ra so visually distinctive. The villain, who became iconic, was invented in response to an early audience telling the producers that the original one was not working. The film that audiences eventually paid to see was, in this specific and significant way, built by the first audience to see a version of it that no longer exists. Now let's talk about the footprint problem. Number 16. The problem the production solved it in the desert. Filming in the Yuma Desert in Arizona in the summer of 1993 produced one problem that nobody on the production had fully anticipated before they arrived: footprints. The film required enormous exterior shots of characters moving through pristine, undisturbed desert. The visual language of an alien world needed to look completely untouched, as though no human had ever walked on its surface. Every morning, the production team would survey their shooting locations and find them looking exactly right. Every take they completed left footprints in the sand. Every setup required a smooth, unmarked surface. The solution was practical and ongoing. The crew had to smooth out the sand between every single take for the entire exterior shoot. While that would have been extremely hectic, it wasn't the only thing that left cast members stressed out. Let's talk about this uncomfortable event. Number 15. What happened when a hurricane hit the set? Summer in Arizona is not just hot, it is the monsoon season, a period of intense rapid weather systems that can move in without warning and with considerable destructive force. The Stargate production discovered this firsthand when a significant storm system moved through their shooting location and damaged the set. The production lost time and had to manage repairs and reshooting around the weather damage, which was an additional pressure on a production that was already dealing with actor conflicts, personal crises, and the general logistical challenge of filming a major production in a remote desert location with no major studio resources behind it. The production adapted and kept moving. But what happens when the director becomes indisposed? Number 14. A 10-minute parody. There was a day when Roland Emmerich was too ill to direct. The insurance company policy for the production prevented them from sending everyone home. You cannot send a cast and crew of that size home because the director has a headache. The production was paying for everyone to be there. They were going to be there. So they made a film. On the day Ronald was sick, he and members of the cast and crew took a Steadicam and shot a 10-minute parody of the entire Stargate movie, in one take, with James Spader being dragged across the desert by a small dog, with a sequence inside the special effects tent showing the VFX crew drinking and smoking, surrounded by crates labeled high explosives, with the camera spinning around as everything blew up, and at the end, a bulldozer flattened Roland Emmerich's director's chair. Unfortunately, one of the next mishaps involved a very important safety rule. Number 13. Kurt Russell. Looked at the lasers. The visual effects work on Stargate involved the use of practical laser effects on set, actual laser equipment generating real light for camera interactions that would later be composited with digital effects in post-production. The protocol for working around laser equipment on a film set is established and consistent. Under no circumstances do you look directly at the laser source. When Kurt Russell was given the instruction not to look at the lasers, the response was predictable to anyone who has worked with actors in a technical environment. He looked at the lasers. Russell survived the experience without injury. Stargate's long-term plans weren't quite so lucky. Number 12. The film was supposed to launch a trilogy. Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin did not conceive Stargate as a standalone film. They had developed a complete trilogy, 3 films that would tell an expanded version of the story, with the second and third installments taking the mythology developed in the original into new territory and building toward a conclusion they had mapped out before the first film was even in production. However, the trilogy never happened. After the success of Stargate, Emmerich and Devlin moved on to Independence Day, which was so successful that it became the organizing framework for the next decade of their careers. The Stargate sequels they had planned were set aside, while they made Godzilla and The Patriot and the other films that followed Independence Day. In 2014, Roland Emmerich announced plans for a reboot trilogy, a completely separate Stargate saga that would begin fresh, ignoring the television franchise that the original film had spawned, and tell the story over 3 films. The announcement generated excitement from the fan base. Then, quietly, the project did not move forward. The studio and the filmmakers could not align on the creative and financial terms required to make 3 films simultaneously. As of 2026, the reboot trilogy remains unproduced. But Stargate's biggest what-if moment came long after the original trilogy was abandoned. Number 11. The Stargate device's hieroglyphs. One of the less discussed achievements of the Stargate production is the level of Egyptological accuracy that went into the film's use of ancient Egyptian language, symbolism, and iconography. Given that the film's premise hinges on the idea that ancient Egypt's mythology was shaped by contact with an alien civilization, the production had a specific obligation to make the Egyptian elements feel authentic enough to be taken seriously. The production hired genuine Egyptological consultants to review and verify the hieroglyphs that appear on the Stargate device and throughout the film's Egyptian sequences. The symbols used in the film are actual ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, deployed in contextually appropriate ways. The attention to detail didn't stop with visuals, it extended into the language itself. Number 10. The phonetic sounds of ancient Egyptian. Whatever James Spader thought about the quality of the script, he made his feelings on that subject clear, then took the preparation for Daniel Jackson's role with extraordinary seriousness. The character of Daniel Jackson is a linguist whose central plot function is his ability to decipher the ancient Egyptian language that unlocks the Stargate's coordinates. For the scenes in which Jackson speaks ancient Egyptian, James worked independently to develop phonetically accurate pronunciation, not simply memorizing sounds as written, but understanding the linguistic structure well enough to deliver the lines with the specific quality of someone who had genuinely internalized the language rather than merely memorized a series of sounds. And yet, even with that attention to detail, the film's opening was not set in stone. Number 9. The original film has a director's cut with a completely different opening. The version of Stargate that opened in theaters on October 28, 1994, begins with a dig in Giza in 1928, where archaeologists discover the Stargate buried in the desert. It is a clean, efficient opening that establishes the film's premise in a few minutes and gets the story moving. The director's cut, released as the Ultimate Edition DVD, includes a different opening sequence set in 8000 BC that shows Ra arriving on Earth as a dying alien entity in search of a human host. The sequence depicts the alien Ra's consciousness transferring into the body of a young human boy, the moment when the alien being that would eventually enslave humanity first arrived on the planet. This scene was cut from the theatrical release, and when it was restored for home video, Roland made the decision to insert it into the 1928 Giza sequence rather than opening the film with it, meaning the director's cut and the theatrical cut are structured differently in ways that affect how the viewer understands Ra from the first scene. The theatrical cut presents Ra as a mystery to be decoded. But beyond how the story was assembled, even getting the film made required unusual coordination. Number 8. The multiple international sources. $55 million for an independently produced science fiction film in 1993 was an enormous sum of money. Getting that money together without a major studio behind you required exactly the kind of international financial engineering that few production companies were equipped to execute. The Stargate production budget was assembled from multiple international co-production partners: French studio Canal+, various European production entities, and the specific kind of pre-sales arrangement, where foreign distributors pay for the rights to distribute a film before it exists, providing the capital that makes the film possible. This is how major independent films worked in the early 1990s, and it required a level of financial and legal sophistication that was as demanding as anything happening on the production side. MGM came in for U.S. distribution because the foreign sales structure required an American distributor with the market presence to make the U.S. release commercially viable. MGM provided that presence. The film was distributed in the United States by MGM/UA Distribution Company, and in France by AMLF. The production companies were Centropolis, Carolco, and Canal+. The flag of the United States and France both appear in the film's official production country documentation. But as complex as the production structure was, the film was also quietly building its creative identity. Number 7. A feature film debut. The Stargate score, sweeping, orchestral, employing genuine Egyptian musical influences in its thematic development, was composed by David Arnold. Stargate was Arnold's feature film scoring debut. He had composed for television and short films before Stargate, but this was the first major theatrical feature he had scored. The quality of the work he delivered for Roland's film was significant enough that the music industry took notice. 2 years after Stargate, Arnold composed the score for Tomorrow Never Dies, the 1997 James Bond film, beginning a relationship with the franchise that would see him score 5 consecutive Bond films through 2008's Quantum of Solace. The path from Emmerich's desert wormhole adventure to Her Majesty's Secret Service ran in a straight line from a single scoring opportunity that nobody at the studios had believed in. And while the score gained recognition, the film itself was performing very differently across the world. Number 6. The film performed much better in Europe than in America. Stargate opened domestically to $16.6 million in its first weekend, which was a reasonable, if not spectacular, opening for a film of its budget and scale. Its domestic total was approximately $71 million. Its international total was approximately $125 million. France, Germany, and Japan in particular responded to the film with the kind of enthusiasm that produced sustained theatrical runs and substantial home video sales. The foreign audience that the production had been designed to serve delivered in exactly the way the financial model required. and that strong overseas response set the stage for a surprising division in the franchise's future. Number 5. A different canon from the film. When Stargate SG-1 premiered on Showtime in July 1997, it was designed to continue the story of the film's characters, Jack O'Neill, Daniel Jackson, and the Stargate itself, in a weekly television format. But the people who made the television series had to navigate a specific problem. They were not the people who made the film, and the film's creators had plans for where the story was supposed to go next. Brad Wright and Jonathan Glassner, who created SG-1, made the deliberate decision to treat the television series as a continuation of the film's universe while making small but significant changes, including Richard Dean Anderson playing a version of Jack O'Neill that was deliberately different from Kurt Russell's film portrayal, and the spelling of the character's name being changed from O'Neill with one L to O'Neill with two L's to signal that this was a related but distinct version. Roland and Dean were not involved in SG-1 and were reportedly not enthusiastic about the television franchise's direction, which diverged from the sequel trilogy they had always planned. The television series ran for 14 years across 3 shows: SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe, without the involvement of the people who created the original mythology. The result is that the most successful and sustained version of the Stargate franchise belongs to people who built on someone else's foundation without their blessing. Behind the franchise politics, the production was making unusual decisions to bring its world to life. Number 4. The Egyptian slave children were played by real children from Arizona. The Abydos sequences feature a large group of child actors playing the enslaved young people who bond with Daniel Jackson and eventually help facilitate the rebellion against Ra. The production needed children who could handle the physical demands of exterior desert filming, learn choreography for the action sequences, and create the sense of an entire young community with genuine ensemble chemistry. The children cast in these roles were largely recruited from the local Arizona area, which meant they were not professional child actors from the Los Angeles studio system. They were Arizona kids who learned what they needed to learn for the film in a relatively compressed time frame. And in some cases, realism was pushed so far that even the visuals were built in the real world, not digitally. Number 3. Ra's eye was practical. The golden eye effect that is Ra's most visually distinctive feature, the dilating eye symbol that appears over his own eye, signaling his alien nature, was not a digital effect. It was a practical contact lens design that was applied directly to J. Davidson's eye for every scene requiring the effect. Contact lens technology in 1993 had not reached the point where this kind of extreme cosmetic application was entirely comfortable or entirely safe. The lenses were custom-made, they were difficult to apply consistently, and wearing them for extended periods during a desert shoot under intense lighting produced exactly the kind of physical discomfort you would expect from experimental contact lens technology being worn in extreme conditions. That physical realism came with real discomfort for the actor, but its impact on the filmmakers went even further. Number 2. The film made Independence Day possible. This is the fact with the largest consequences of any on this list. Stargate opened on October 28, 1994, and performed well enough internationally that it established Emmerich and Devlin as a creative partnership with genuine commercial viability. The film's international success, particularly the European numbers, demonstrated to the industry that these two people knew how to make large-scale spectacle films that audiences outside America would pay to see. Independence Day went into production directly on the back of Stargate's commercial performance. The 1996 alien invasion film grossed $817 million worldwide, was one of the first films in history to gross over $300 million domestically, and essentially created the template for the modern summer blockbuster. The alien attack movie with a large ensemble cast, spectacular practical and digital effects work, and a single weekend performance that resets expectations for what commercial cinema can generate. And from that moment on, Stargate's influence stopped being about one movie and became something far bigger. Number 1. 30 years non-stop. The complete Stargate franchise as of 2026 includes the original 1994 film, Stargate SG-1, which ran for 10 seasons from 1997 to 2007, Stargate Atlantis, which ran for 5 seasons from 2004 to 2009, Stargate Universe, which ran for 2 seasons from 2009 to 2011, the direct-to-video films The Arc of Truth and Continuum, multiple video games, comic book series, novels, and the ongoing discussions about reboots and revivals that have characterized the franchise's relationship with its fan base for the past decade. The combined television run of the 3 Stargate series represents some 354 episodes of television, 14 years of stories built on the mythology that Roland and Dean developed and then did not personally continue. The world they created in a script that 2 of their lead actors publicly called terrible, that every major studio passed on, that was made independently on a $55 million budget assembled from international sources, has generated more story, more character, more mythology, and more devoted fanbase engagement than most franchises built with significantly more institutional support. The franchise that nobody believed in, that launched with a cast in various states of personal crisis and professional dissatisfaction, that was filmed in 100-degree Arizona heat, with a crew smoothing out footprints in the sand between every take, has been running for 30 years. The door the Stargate opened in 1994 has not closed since. Which fact surprised you the most? And does knowing how chaotic the production was change how you watch the finished film? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.